Okay, it's early in the morning and I'm sitting in my building's hallway so I don't wake the kids up. I've been working on a speech of sorts for the last couple days. Very few words in this are mine. What I've done is I've compiled a bunch of historical quotes to form a speech. I will post the original quotes when I post this video. Okay, so here we go. Great men of integrity and intellect, and some evil men as well, have stated the following. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of election, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day, in a system which was conscripted vast human and material resources in the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligent, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. Since I have entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the nation, in the field of commerce and manufacture, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so persuasive, that they better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies is to create a one-world government combining supercapitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent. The idea that those who direct the overall conspiracy could use the difference in those two so-called ideologies to enable them to divide larger and larger portions of the human race into opposing camps so that they could be armed and then brainwashed into fighting and destroying each other. Very soon, every citizen will be required to register their biological property in a national system, designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every citizen will be forced to register or suffer being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. The citizen, by unknowingly and unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value, designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser. For not one man in a million could ever figure our plans, and if by accident one or two should figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debts to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations, and leave every citizen a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every citizen will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of our dummy corporation to foment this plan against the nation. Where globalization means, as it so often does, that the rich and powerful now have new means to further enrich and empower themselves at the cost of the poorer and the weaker, we have a responsibility to protest in the name of universal freedom. Today, the nation would be outraged if the UN troops entered to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all people of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by the world government. The New World Order under the UN will reduce everything to one common denominator. The system will be made of a single currency, single centrally financed government, single tax system, single language, single political system, single world court of justice, single state religion. Each person will have a registered number without which he will not be allowed to buy or sell. And there will be one universal world church. Anyone who refuses to take part of this universal system will have no right to exist. The world today has 6.8 billion. That's headed up to about 9 billion people. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 to 15%. A total world population of 250 to 300 million people, or a 95% decline from present levels, would be ideal. If I were reincarnated, I would wish to be returned to Earth as a killer virus to lower human population levels. Did you ever notice who it is? Stop to think who it is we kill? It's always people who have told us to live together in harmony and try to love one another. Jesus, Gandhi, Lincoln, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, John Lennon, they all said, try to live together peacefully. Bam, right in the fucking head. Apparently we're not ready for that. The UN is but a long-range international banking apparatus clearly set up for financial and economic profit by a small group of power, one world government hungry for profit and power. We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plans for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now much more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. We are at present working discreetly with all our might to wrest this mysterious force called sovereignty out of the clutches of the local nation state of the world. All the time, we are denying with our lips what we are doing with our hands. Through clever and constant application of propaganda, people can be made to see paradise as hell, and also the other way around, to consider the most wretched sort of life as paradise. People only have as much liberty as they have the intelligence to want and the courage to take. How fortunate for governments that the people they administer don't think. If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. Sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect that core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit in with that core belief. To counter this, don't just teach your children to read. Teach them to question everything they read. Teach them to question everything. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Also, education is not synonymous with knowledge, but when educated properly, the knowledge gained is power. Don't listen to the person who has the answers. Listen to the person who has the questions. If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. And if freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. Life is never easy. There is work to be done and obligations to be met. Obligations to truth, to justice, and to liberty. This is the deadening consensus that crosses party lines, that dominates our major media, and that is strangling the liberty and prosperity that were once our birthright. Dissenters who tell their fellow citizens what is really going on are subject to smear campaigns that, like clockwork, are aimed at the political heretic. Truth is treason in the empire of lies. I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of a society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power. May I stress the need for courageous, intelligent, and dedicated leadership. Leaders of sound integrity, leaders not in love with publicity, but in love with justice. Leaders not in love with money, but in love with humanity. Leaders who can subject their particular egos to the greatness of the cause. With courage, you will dare to take risks, have the strength to be compassionate, and the wisdom to be humble. Courage is the foundation of integrity. I ask, what is integrity if not a measure of one's character? The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the true goal of education. Here is a bumper sticker I'd like to see. We are the proud parents of a child who has resisted his teacher's attempts to break his spirit and bend him to the will of his corporate masters. And therein lies the problem. The best way to solve any problem is to remove its cause. But why would you listen to me? I have as much authority as the Pope, I just don't have as many people who believe it. Since action speaks louder than words, but not nearly as often, you cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. Efforts and courage are not enough without purpose and direction. These are honorable ideals to want to uphold, but they are still based on moral principles, and principles have no real force except when one is well fed. One such principle would be the principle of sovereignty. Until the control of issue of currency and credit is restored to the government and recognized as its most conspicuous and sacred responsibility, all talks of the sovereignty of Parliament and of democracy is idle and futile. Once a nation parts with the control of its credit, it matters not who makes the laws. Usury, once in control, will wreck a nation. Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws. Money plays the largest part in determining the course of history. I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. If the people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their forefathers conquered. When a government is dependent on bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation. Since the hand that gives is above the hand that takes, money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is to gain. Our whole monetary system is dishonest, as it is debt-based. We did not vote for it. It grew upon us gradually but markedly since 1971, when the commodity-based system was abandoned. The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Banking was conceived in inequity and born in sin. Bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money and control credit, and with the flick of a pen, they will create enough money to buy it back again. Take this great power away from the bankers, and all the great fortunes like mine will disappear, and they ought to disappear, for this world would be a better and happier world to live in. But if you want to continue to be the slaves of the bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create money and to control credit. We are lucky to live in a country as rich as ours. To break it apart would be asinine in the highest degree. It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. A new type of thinking is essential if mankind is to survive and move towards higher levels. True compassion is more than flinging a coin at a beggar. It comes to see that the edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. We shall be Canadians first, foremost, and always, and our policies will be decided in Canada and not dictated by any other country or the United Nations. Canadians, like their historians, have spent too much time remembering conflicts, crises, and failures. They forgot the great, quiet continuity of life in a vast and generous land. A cautious people learn from its past. A sensible people can face its future. Canadians, on a whole, are both. In a time of domestic crisis, men of goodwill and generosity should be able to unite, regardless of party or politics. In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but one must take it because one's conscience tells one that is right. Patriotism is supporting your country all the time, and your government when it deserves it. I am not afraid of the words of the violent, but of the silence of the honest. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. If people are good only because they fear punishment and hope for reward, then we are a sorry lot indeed. A nation can survive its fools, and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banner openly. But the traitor moves amongst those within the gate freely, his sly whispers rustling through the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. The spineless pussy willows in Ottawa are actually helping to condition the Canadian public to accept the surrender of our country, which American forces were unable to accomplish in 1776 and 1812. Treason is when legislators vote against homeland security measures because it goes against the wishes of their political or financial backers. Government's first duty is to protect the people, not run their lives. Unthinking respect for authority is the greatest enemy of truth, and one who breaks an unjust law that conscience tells him is unjust, and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the consciousness of the community over its injustice, is in reality expressing the highest respect for law. A social movement that only moves people is merely a revolt. A movement that changes both people and the institutions is a revolution. When dictatorship is a fact, revolution becomes a right. Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. In the beginning of a change, the patriot is a scarce man and brave, and hated and scorned. When his cause succeeds, the timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot. I know it's hard to say we failed, but it's the first step needed to address this problem. Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. Life is meant to be enjoyed, not endured. Mankind had the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and now this third one, the information revolution. Our strategy should not only be to confront empire, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it with our art, our music, our literature, our stubbornness, our joy, our brilliance, our sheer relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own stories, stories that are different from the ones we were brainwashed to believe. The corporate revolution will collapse if we refuse to buy what they are selling, their ideas, their version of history, their wars, their weapons, their notion of an inevitability. Remember this, we be many and they be few. They need us more than we need them. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. You never change things by fighting against the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. Our freedoms are vanishing. If you do not get active to take a stand now against all that is wrong, while we still can, then maybe one of your children may elect to do so in the future, when it will be far more riskier and much, much harder. If not us, who? If not now, when? If patriotism were defined not as blind obedience to the government, not as submissive worship to flags and anthems, but rather as love for one's country, one's fellow citizens, and as loyalty to the principles of justice and democracy, then patriotism would require us to disobey our government when it violated these principles. A revolution is coming, a revolution which will be peaceful if we are wise enough, compassionate if we care enough, successful if we are fortunate enough, but revolution which is coming whether we will it or not. We can affect its character, we cannot alter its inevitability. Revolutions begin in putting on bright colors. Our forefathers wore military uniforms and fought wars as patriots to their countries to defend our freedom, sovereignty, and liberty. The yellow vest will be the symbol of this generation's patriots to defend those very principles against an ever more overreaching and tyrannical government that aims to declare a dictatorship over us free people of the world. Thank you.